Welcome back to Zone of Fear, the channel where we dive into the unsettling and unexplained. Today's episode is going to hit closer to home. We're talking about real-life horror stories, terrifying incidents that happened in public places. You know, the spaces we visit every single day without a second thought. Malls, parks, trains, and buses. These aren't isolated, off-the-grid scenarios. They're chilling events that remind us that fear can find us in the most familiar settings. You've been requesting this for months, and today, I've gathered 3 harrowing true stories that'll leave you double-checking over your shoulder the next time you're out in public. Let's get into it. But just a heads up, you're going to want to keep the lights on for this one. Our first story takes place in a shopping mall, a location we all know like the back of our hands. It was an ordinary Saturday afternoon. Busy crowds, lines at the food court, kids clinging to their parents' legs. For Sarah, it was just another weekend shopping for clothes. That was until she stepped into the parking garage. After finishing her errands, Sarah walked toward her car carrying 2 bulky shopping bags. The corridor connecting the mall to the garage was dimly lit, with faint echoes of distant footsteps bouncing off the concrete walls. That's when she noticed him. A man standing near the exit in a dark hoodie, staring directly at her. At first, Sarah brushed it off. He's probably waiting for his ride, she thought. But as she moved closer, the man didn't stay put. He began walking toward her. And here's where things took a sinister turn. His pace matched hers, purposeful, but completely silent, apart from the hard, rhythmic thuds of his boots against the concrete floor. Sarah's chest tightened as her own footsteps quickened. No matter how fast she moved, he followed, his expression stone cold. When she reached her car, her hands were shaking so badly that she dropped her keys twice trying to unlock the door. She could feel him closing in, his presence like a shadow stretching over her. Finally, she got the door open, but just as she slammed it shut, she heard him speak for the first time. "You shouldn't have run," he said. His voice was calm, almost casual, but the malice behind it was unmistakable. Sarah locked the doors and started the ignition, refusing to look him in the eye. When she finally turned her head, he was right outside her window, staring at her, unmoving, suffocatingly still. He didn't try to force his way in, didn't knock. He just watched. And then, as she pulled away, he vanished into the shadows of the garage. Sarah never used that mall parking lot again. Even now, years later, she still parks near the main entrance, no matter how inconvenient it is. Because that man, he was never caught. And the thought of his face, hollow and emotionless, still sends shivers down her spine. The second story pulls us out of the chaotic rush of malls and into a park, a space where people go to unplug and relax. But for Emily, this park became something darker, something she would avoid for the rest of her life. It was a warm summer evening, and Emily was hanging out with friends near the tree line. They had spread out a blanket, snacked on chips, and watched the sunset. Occasionally, joggers and dog walkers passed by, but the park felt calm, typical. But as the sky turned a deeper shade of blue, Emily began noticing something strange. There was a man standing at the edge of the woods, too far to make out his features, but unmistakably watching her. He didn't move, didn't sit down, didn't even glance away. Her friends laughed it off when she pointed it out, but Emily couldn't shake the sight of him. That sliver of unease only grew worse as time dragged on. By the time the group decided to pack up, the man was gone. Or so she thought. Emily spotted him just as they were leaving. He had moved closer, standing motionless again, this time only 50 feet away. When she pointed him out, he vanished into the trees. Minutes later, as the group hurried toward the parking lot, Emily felt her heart drop. She heard it, the sound of quick, deliberate footsteps behind them, and then his breathing. Heavy, labored. She didn't have to turn around to know he was there. All at once, the group broke into a sprint, tripping over bags and bumping into one another on the path's uneven gravel. Before jumping into their cars and peeling out of the lot, Emily caught one last glimpse. The man standing at the edge of the park, staring. They filed a report with the police, but it led nowhere. Emily stopped going to the park entirely and learned to trust her instincts no matter what others said, because she knows now that sometimes menacing eyes are closer than you think. Our final story moves to one of the most public spaces imaginable, a city bus. Late-night routes are supposed to be predictable, but Jessica's evening commute turned into a nightmare. She was the last to board the bus after waiting alone at the stop. At first, it felt like a relief. The bus was mostly empty, just a handful of passengers scattered in the brightly lit vehicle. But right as the doors closed, he stepped inside. Ignoring everything else, Jessica kept her eyes glued to her phone, but her gut told her otherwise. She could feel his gaze burning into her skin. His muttered whispers started quietly, growing louder, sharper, but still incomprehensible. Jessica thought about moving closer to the driver, but that would mean crossing his path, so she froze, paralyzed in her seat. When her stop approached, she rushed off the bus, clutching her bag tightly. She hoped he would stay, but no, he followed. His boots hit the pavement behind her in heavy sync, closer with every step. Jessica ducked down a side street, praying that she'd lose him. But by the time she reached her apartment door, she turned around, and he was there, staring. "You shouldn't have run," he sneered, calm yet venomous. When she locked herself inside, he didn't knock or force his way in. He simply stared into her window from the street before walking off into the night. Jessica never rode the late bus again, but the man who followed, he disappeared, nameless and faceless. These stories remind us of one undeniable truth: fear has no boundaries. It thrives in places we think we're safe: shopping malls, parks, buses. Let these be reminders to trust your instincts, stay aware, and never take safety for granted. If you've lived through a chilling moment like one of these, let me know in the comments below. Until next time, stay safe and stay vigilant.